Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar. We are going to go ahead and get started in just a moment here. We are going to be talking about incorporating demand modeling into your supply chain design. I am Jennifer Randall of the marketing team at LLamasoft, and I welcome you and thank you for joining us. It's my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter for today, Vikram Srinivasan. He is Product Manager for Demand Guru at LLamasoft, and I'm sure many of you know him from local user groups and SummerCon and other events. I'm going to quickly go over what we are going to cover in today's webinar. We're going to start out with a high-level introduction of why demand modeling is a crucial capability for businesses today. And then we're going to get into some specific challenges with demand as part of supply chain design. And then we'll talk a little bit about what Demand Guru is, show you a brief product demonstration, and talk about steps that you can take to learn more. And then we'll get into some of your questions. So speaking of questions, how to get your questions answered. During the presentation, just enter your questions in the Q&A box and we will answer them at the end of the presentation.
Thanks, Jen. Hi, everyone. I'm Vikram Srinivasan, and I would like to welcome you all to the first webinar on Demand Guru. I'm really excited to give you all an overview of the product today, talk you through some of the key business problems it can help solve for you, and give you all a quick demo of the product as well. Before we talk about Demand Guru, let's take a step back and look at the significance of demand modeling. Demand is probably one of the most important factors that influences the design of your future supply chain. While you design a better future state, there are always a few key questions around demand that we ask ourselves. Why is future demand different than you thought? What are the components and drivers of it? Is it the long-term growth that's changing, or are there any products that are declining over time that you need to consider and look into? There are more of these questions that we can ask ourselves, but the key question to all of this is, how might that information help improve the design of your future supply chain, and how are you incorporating that today as part of your process? And hence, by understanding demand a lot more and being able to incorporate that into your design process, you can back that with better insight and confidence in the decision-making process. Also, by understanding the components of demand and what drives it, it enables you to create accurate demand scenarios and sensitivities. So you can look at, for example, how the change of price might impact demand, not just for the short term, but medium and long term as well, and consider those as part of your design process. The fourth aspect of this is having a repeatable process to capture that change, given how dynamic demand is and the changing trends within it. We talked about the dynamic nature of demand and the fact that it's constantly changing over time. But what causes that behavior? In order to answer that question, we need to understand what influences your demand. And we can look at that in three different categories. We have internal business factors that are within your own supply chain, like procurement policies, promotions, marketing spend, and product price. They have a big impact on your demand. And then you have market factors that are within your own vertical that might influence your demand, like market customer trends or competition and things like that. And then you have external global factors that might impact your business operations, like weather, macroeconomic indicators like GDP, inflation rate, unemployment, and things like that. So these factors are constantly changing, and they have a significant impact on your demand as well. However, there are current challenges with incorporating demand modeling as part of the design process. We've talked to some of you in the past regarding this and collected your feedback. We've verified this at SummerCon as well. But one of the challenges with demand modeling with the process today that you guys have is the complexity of demand. So we see simple growth factors that are being used to capture complexity of future long-term trends is using 5, 10, 15, or 20% as growth factors across various product families in other regions of the world. And that assumption might necessarily not hold true in the complexity that we have within demand. And so that's one big challenge of how can you better represent the true growth factors so that when you're making a capacity decision plan or looking at right-sizing inventory, you're considering the true demand that you anticipate for the future as part of the design process. The second aspect is the inability to quantify what factors really impact your demand. We've talked about different types of demand influencers within your business and outside, and without having a good understanding of that, it makes it very difficult to back up the design recommendations with a lot of confidence, especially when these decisions are changing the current supply chain state for a better future state. The third aspect is understanding key demand characteristics. So within demand, you have different characteristics like seasonality, trend, variability, and product life cycle. So you could have a highly seasonal product or a product exhibiting different trends and growth or high or low variability and might be either in its growth phase, mature phase, or declining phase. And within your SKU portfolio, you could have all these different combinations. So with a lack of without understanding this, it makes it very hard to bring in the right level of information for your design model. And finally, the level of granularity. Within our design model needs, we are aggregating products and sites and other aspects and bringing in the right level of granularity we need to make the design decisions we need to have. But the demand and the future demand signals are often not represented in the right level as well. So that poses a challenge. And how do we bring in the level of granularity of demand to meet the design needs so that we're not taking a forecast from another part of the organization that really doesn't tell us much about what drove it and how it can be used in the design model. And so that's why we built Demand Guru, to help address the challenges we talked about. And with Demand Guru, you can visually explore all the key drivers of your demand. You can model to gain better insight, but also test alternate hypotheses of what makes demand happen. You can predict demand into the future, not just short term, but medium and long term as well, with state-of-the-art machine learning algorithms that we've incorporated. The fourth aspect is out-of-the-box access to external time series data to enable causative modeling as part of predicting demand for the future. So at LLamasoft, we're building what we're calling a data cube that houses all these different types of external time series data, such as weather, macroeconomic data like GDP, inflation, unemployment rates, oil price, consumption of oil, crude oil, and other aspects. We have about 280 countries with 250 different types of economic indicators and metrics. We have weather data for close to 30,000 cities as well. And all this data, you get access to it with a click of a button within Demand Guru. And that's very powerful in terms of how you can enable causative modeling by really considering all the different factors with a click of a button. And we'll show you that with an example in the demo as well. The other aspect of it is the ability to integrate across all other LLamasoft products. As you will see in the demo, Demand Guru is very tightly coupled with Data Guru. And some of you already use Data Guru. It's a tool that enables you to build design models, supply chain guru models, and you can build them automatically in a repeatable fashion. And because Demand Guru is so tightly coupled to Data Guru, you can enable the demand modeling aspect to it as part of creating these models. And we'll show you all that in a second here with the demo. So up until this point, we've already talked about how Demand Guru can add value to your business use cases and what types of business problems can it solve. So in this slide, I just want to summarize that. And on the left, as you can see here, we have the supply chain designers and analysts use cases. And on the right, we have the business leaders use case. Like we've talked about, the key highlights here are the ability to quickly build out future demand scenarios to test sensitivities or applying the right growth factors to products and geographies in order to test design robustness. We can explore key drivers of demand by considering external factors from our data cube. We can look at key product characteristics like seasonality, intermittency, trend, and so on. And finally, being able to de-seasonalize and de-trend your demand to remove known sources of variability as part of right-sizing safety stock. From a business leader's perspective, we want to be able to enable and support the long-term business plan and strategy. And we want to be able to provide better understanding of the customer buying behavior, along with quick analysis around demand sensitivity to price and market changes. And finally, a quick way to easily interpret visual output as part of the product. Before we take a look at the demo of the product, I would like to walk you guys through the key elements of Demand Guru. As you can see in the slide here, starting on the left, we have the data blending capabilities, where you can easily connect to and transform demand data from any ERP system that would then meet the demand modeling needs. All of this data blending happens within Data Guru. And like I mentioned earlier, Data Guru and Demand Guru are very tightly coupled to each other. You'll see in the demo how I can transition between Data Guru and Demand Guru seamlessly. In the middle, we have the demand modeling section where I can go and classify my demand by variability, product lifecycle, or intermittency. I can then explore demand influencers, be it my business influencers or market influencers, or if I want, I can go and connect directly to our data cube and pull in external factors like weather and economic data. And in the third section, we have predict future demand, where I can create very powerful demand models that are powered by machine learning algorithms that will enable me to predict demand for both the short, medium, and long term. I can create as many demand models as I want to test alternate hypotheses of what makes demand happen. I can create as many demand scenarios as I would like by tweaking the demand influencers and understanding the sensitivity around demand, given a change to the driver of demand. Once I've done all that, I can take the results that come out of the demand modeling exercise and publish the results into a design model, be it a supply chain guru model or a model that resides on the cloud. So as you can see, this entire process is an automated and repeatable process, and within minutes, you can take an existing workflow in Data Guru and create immediate value by adding demand modeling to it. Now that we've looked at the business use cases for Demand Guru, let's take a look at the product demo. The demo we're going to look at today is based on a retail company that is interested in expanding capacities of their plants based on some of the demand growth they're seeing within their product lines. They're also looking at right-sizing their inventory at their stores. To be accurate with this process, they would like to leverage demand modeling to help them understand and quantify what factors influence their demand, to determine the appropriate growth factors for a product line by geography and region, and build out various demand scenarios to test out the robustness of their design process. I'd also like to look at seasonality and trend for each of these product lines to help understand what is the known source of variability versus the unknown in order to right-size inventory.
All right, let's take a look at how we can solve the business problem that I just reviewed with you guys using Demand Guru. What you're seeing here first is a workflow that's open within Data Guru. For those who have not seen Data Guru in the past, we have on the left here connections that I've made to pull in the data, and within the workflow, I'm creating macros that can be run on a repeatable process where I first start with data blending, where I bring in the data and transform it to meet my demand model needs. Once the data is ready, I can then consume that data within Demand Guru, which I'll show you in a second. And then once I've performed demand modeling, I can take the output that comes out of the demand modeling exercise and map it to a Supply Chain Guru X model. So we'll look at some of these aspects today as part of the demo. I'm going to show you how I can seamlessly transition from Data Guru to Demand Guru. So you look up here in the mode, I can select between the Data Guru and Demand Guru view. So once you've purchased Demand Guru, all you need to do is to click the Demand Guru view, and you've seamlessly entered into Demand Guru right now. As you can see, the connections that I showed you in Data Guru are also available as part of Demand Guru. So let's take a look at the data very quickly. So I have demand data that I'm bringing in, and I also have external factors that I'm bringing in as part of the demand modeling exercise. So I have temperature, fuel price, different levels of markdowns, consumer price index, and unemployment. All these different factors can be quickly brought into the demand modeling workbench, like I'll show you in a second. So as you can see here, I'm starting off with the time series forecasting workbench. As part of that, I'm going to configure my input to point to the demand table and the table that I just showed you that has all the external factors. Once I've brought in my data, which includes both my demand and causal data, I'm now ready to go and configure my workbench. I'm going to be performing demand modeling at the department level. So you can see here my group by is at the department name level. And I'm forecasting out 25 weeks. As you can see here, I'm also bringing in temperature, promotion, CPI, and unemployment. The third tab here is the demand modeling tab. And as you can see here, I have 3 sections in it. I have the demand time series section where I've created, based on the group by of department, 10 different time series that correspond to each of the departments in the retail store. In the next section, I have the demand models where I can create the right demand models to help me predict my demand and also understand how external factors and business factors influence my demand. And in the next section here is where I can look at visually the output that comes out of my demand model. I can look at the demand model fit, I can look at a forecast, I can also look at what variable is important and how does it impact the demand. So what I'm going to do now is to look at the first department here, department number 3, and for each of these demand time series, I have an automatic demand model. What this means is you as a user can just run the automatic model and we will detect the right algorithm that needs to be used depending on the demand signal we see. So we will automatically pick the best model for your demand and fit the right model and help you predict future demand more accurately by looking at these patterns and analyzing it. Let's look at Department 3 in a little more detail. So within Department 3, when I run the automatic model, the model looks at the time series and helps determine the best fit for it, and also helps project out 25 weeks into the future. So when I click the Show Demand icon here, I can see the historical fit in blue, but also the forecasted values in red. The model is using a machine learning algorithm and trying to come up with the best fit model here. I can scroll to the right and look at what algorithm was selected. In this example, it was SVM Linear, which is a machine learning algorithm. And if I keep scrolling to the right here, I can look at different types of in-sample and out-of-sample error metrics that helps me determine how accurate my forecast was. Once I've determined at a high level how well my model behaved, I can try to understand a little more into what drives the demand model fit that I see here. So I can quickly go to the causal summary that helps me understand that. And you can see here that I'm looking at the causal variables here that both the algorithm generated and that I provided as input to the model. So I'm looking at demand lag 1 and demand lag 2 as algorithm generated causals, meaning the model thought that knowing the previous week's demand of 2 weeks of demand in the past enables us to predict future demand. So there's a correlation within the demand signal itself. We call that autocorrelation. And you can see the variable importance is very high for those. There's also a high positive correlation between that variable and our demand. It also detects a trend within the demand. So there's a very high importance on the variable trend that the model generated. I can then look at CPI, consumer price index, that I gave as an input, where the model is saying it is of high importance. So let me show you how I can quickly look at external factors or business factors that I've brought in as part of the causative modeling here. So with the click of a button, I can quickly plot the consumer price index overlaid over the demand. And you can see that the model is using a dual axis here on the right in the graph, where you can see the correlation visually and try to understand how CPI might have an impact on your demand. I can do the same thing for promotion, where I can see a spike and see the impact on demand, or look at unemployment rates, see how the drop in unemployment rate has an impact in my demand. And you can also see that the model says there's a negative correlation between my unemployment rate and my demand. So this quickly tells you and explains to you what's driving your demand, which factors are important, ranking them by variable importance, and not just looking at the factors that you provided, but also looking at factors that it thinks are important from just inherent within the demand signal. So in seconds, I'm basically able to understand what's driving my demand and able to look at the future values of those drivers to predict my future demand. I can add as many demand models as I want within my demand model section to explore my demand by considering different algorithms. I can also consider different causal time series or variations of existing ones. So what if I wanted to look at a different level of promotion? I can bring that variable in and consider a different scenario with a higher promotion or a lower one. I can do the same thing for consumer price index and assume, what if there was a more aggressive growth in my consumer price index? Would that impact my demand? All this can be done very quickly with adding a new model and testing the alternate hypothesis. I've run this demand model that I created, and I have a slightly different fit to the automatic model. I, as a user, can compare both models and toggle between them to understand what's really differing and what types of algorithms are better used on one time series versus the other. I can look at different other demand time series here. In this example, it's all about the seasonality. So in my causal summary, you can see that the model generated a lot of different seasonal indices here and gave it very high importance. And when I project out to the future, it's detecting the seasonal pattern as well. So you can do this across all 10 demand time series here. And then once you're done with understanding the future and also what's driving it and testing alternate hypothesis, you can go back to Data Guru and quickly run this entire workflow, where this workbench action within Data Guru will remember all the different configurations as part of Demand Guru's workbench and execute that to come up with the right future demand scenarios. I can then take the output with all the different tables that are being generated from this workbench action. I can take the appropriate tables and map them to my Supply Chain Guru X model very quickly. So one last part I wanted to highlight, in addition to what I showed you with the demand modeling exercise, is the data cube. So we have a data cube action that can directly connect to the data cube and help the user pull external time series data like weather and economic data and quickly perform demand modeling with it. So when I double click this action, I'm connecting to the data cube now, and I can look at very quickly all the data that's available within the data cube. I can very easily browse through the data just like I would do in Excel with simple filtering. And in this example, I'm looking at weather data across a whole bunch of different countries in the world, and this covers about 37,000 cities with about 10 different types of weather measurements like temperature, pressure, humidity, clouds, and so on. I can also quickly filter on economic data and look at the different types of measurements within economic data. So by quickly filtering on it, I can see economic data available for about 240 countries with 250 different types of measurements. So right here, I have Afghanistan, and I have a whole bunch of different types of measurements available for Afghanistan. I can look at balance of trade, corporate tax, currency, corruption, GDP, imports, inflation rate, and so on. I can also filter by country and narrow my search down to countries starting with United. And I can also look at measurements like GDP. And these are all the different time series available within the data cube for countries starting with United and have GDP information. So once I've configured that, I can say yes to this and very quickly run this action. And what comes out of that is a table with all the different types of demand time series for each of those countries. So this is GDP information that I can now, like I showed you earlier, bring into my Demand Guru workbench as active causal time series that I could go and model. So you can see here that in seconds, you're able to browse the data cube, bring in external data, and then bring it into the demand model workbench to go and perform demand modeling. So while concluding this demo here, we've seen how we can go between Data Guru and Demand Guru seamlessly and look at an end-to-end workflow, starting with data blending, performing demand modeling, and the ability to quickly take the output that's coming out of a demand model to an SETX table. We also looked at the data cube and how we can add a lot of value by bringing in the appropriate causal variables.
So just a couple more slides before we conclude the session here. What I'd like to do is to spend a minute on showing you guys the SummerCon 2017 survey feedback that we received for the Discovery Station for Demand Guru. We had a few questions, and I've just summarized a couple of them here in the slide. The first question was, do you currently incorporate demand modeling as part of your design process? And as you can see, 75% of the responses said yes, using simple spreadsheets. So there's definitely a lot more you could do with demand modeling and accurately represent your demand within your design model. And Demand Guru can quickly enable you to do that. The second question was, where do you find the best fit for demand modeling? And so the choices were long-term capacity planning, inventory strategy development, network design, production planning, and other. And you can see the mix is kind of across the board here. A good portion is inventory, and across the network design use cases, we have 3 different parts that have been spread out. And you can see there's a good appetite for applying demand modeling to various aspects of design, not just a network infrastructure planning problem, but be it a capacity planning, a production planning, or inventory strategy development. So how do you take the next step? You can join our Demand Guru opt-in list to receive the latest news and events about the product. I see that some of you have already registered as part of the opt-in list based on the link that was sent out in the newsletter. You can also download the brochure that's currently available. Additionally, you can attend your regional exchange forum to stay up to date on the newest LLamasoft solutions. This webinar will also be available on demand. And finally, look for our follow-up email with all the links that we talked about and reviewed today. I hope you guys enjoyed learning more about Demand Guru today and what you saw as part of the demo. Stay tuned for more on the product. Thanks so much for your time.
So thank you again for your questions that are coming in. We are going to take those one at a time, and Vikram will go ahead and answer them. So I'm just go ahead and encourage you to continue to add any other questions that come to mind, and we'll go ahead and start answering the questions. Vic, are you ready?
Yep, I am.
All right, so our first question is Demand Guru able to model long-term forecasting by using lead indicators, such as quantity of vehicles in usage on streets, for example?
Yep, absolutely. So as you guys saw in the demo, we can support causative modeling where we can look at long-term trends by considering external factors. And if you want to consider the quantity of vehicle usage, you can bring that in very quickly as a causal factor and then see how that correlates or impacts your demand. And once we've established how it interacts in the historic data, we can use those and understand how we can project it out to the future as well. And in addition to that, you could look at variables within the data cube to see around what you just asked about, the related factors that you'd like to add and bring in as well to understand causality.
Great, thanks, Vikram. The second question is, does the projection of demand consider the projection of sellout as an input?
Yep. Again, it's the around the same concept of the causative modeling, where once we've established the relationship between the demand and the external factors or business factors, we can use that in our projections for the future demand as well. So if we know about the sellout, and we've seen it in the past, we can understand the relationship and help project that out in the future as well.
I have a third question here for you. Does the system have information from Mexico?
Yes. So as part of the data cube, like I mentioned, we have close to 250 different countries that we support, and Mexico is part of it. So once you have access to Demand Guru, you can very easily browse the data cube and filter down by the country column and look for all types of weather and economic factors within Mexico as well.
Thanks, Vikram. There's another question about scenario analysis, and we might need a little clarification. The question is, how about scenario analysis? 5% growth, 7%, and so on.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And from a demand modeling standpoint, the key is around the sensitivities and what-if analysis as well. So like I showed you in the demo, you can add as many different demand models as you want. And within each of those demand models, you can change the growth factor of a specific variable that you want to consider. And then you can see, depending on that, what is the impact to your demand and see if it's going to create a change in the growth. Now, inherently, when we project out to the future, based on the forecasted demand and the trend that it's following, you can compute a very quick growth factor based on the future demand versus how it's compared to the historical data. So if you had 10 different product families and when we ran the demand modeling and forecasting, maybe it detects certain trends that are more aggressive than others, and you can quickly compute those growth factors based on the forecast output versus history.
Thank you. The next question is, which models can be used to predict the demand?
Which models can be used?
We might need to just take that one offline since we probably could answer it better with a little bit more detail. That was from Dennis. Dennis, why don't we get a little bit more information from you to be able to help you with that question?
Is that, can you, maybe it's different types of algorithms? If that is the case, we can look at, traditional forecasting algorithms. We can access causative modeling algorithms, and also we have about 5 to 6 different types of machine learning algorithms that can enable us to forecast demand. If that's not the specific question, we can definitely take it offline as well.
All right, there's a question here about data specific to the Russian Federation in the data cube. Vikram?
Yeah, I think we definitely support, data from Russia, and, specifically if you want to look at different states and different aspects within the country, then we would have to, take that as a one-off case. But at a high level, yes, absolutely.
All right, and the next question is, for strategic network design, we may have high-level growth factors. Does this tool distribute this growth across regions and product groups using demand patterns?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it all depends on how we've set up the demand modeling workbench. So if we did set it up at a level where it's at the product family and knows where the region of the product group is as well. So if it's by product region, product group, then you automatically get that. But there are also capabilities that we're building in where we can basically take in a forecast at any high level, do a top-down forecast to go to a detailed level, depending on the hierarchy that you provided. So before, I couldn't show that in the demo here, but that's actively in development, which would be available very shortly, and definitely before release as well. And the other aspect to it is when you're looking at high-level growth, we would also support product life cycles so that we can detect the stage of your product and then use that to predict longer-term projections as well.
Thanks, Vic. The last question I have here for right now is, does it allow you to set the capacity and constraints of your manufacturing equipment and lines, like run rate, changeovers, allergens, and other things, to see what impact the modeled forecast will have on production and if additional capacity would be needed?
Yeah, and that question is a good one in terms of how we can look at this in terms of how demand modeling fits in with the whole overall paradigm, right? The end-to-end design process. So like we looked at the start of the data group workflow, we're bringing in data, we're doing some demand modeling, but at the end of it, we're taking the output that comes out of the demand model and feeding it in to a Supply Chain Guru model. So the output can be configured using some simple connections to push into a Supply Chain Guru model. Because it's so seamlessly connected, now when you open up Supply Chain Guru, you have different scenarios of your demand that you could configure and then run Supply Chain Guru to get more into the details of the production question that you asked. So the production plan will look at the new demand that's generated from Demand Guru and be able to tie the whole problem together and say, okay, historical demand required a certain production plan. Now that I see and incorporated the true growth factors by product family, or whatever level you need to, then the model can determine if additional capacity is needed, if it's going to obey or disobey the constraints, and so on. And that's the broader piece here, is to say, once we've understood the demand, it's really easy to take the results coming out of Demand Guru and bring it into your design model, be it a production model, be it inventory model, a transportation distribution model, any of that, you can quickly bring in demand and now use Supply Chain Guru in addition now to understand what that reflects in terms of your new design and how good is the new design to these changes and the real trend that we're seeing within demand.
Looks like a few other questions have come in. The first one is, when is Demand Guru planned for release?
So the product right now, we are in getting close to the beta, and release would be early October.
The next question, Vikram, is really closely related to the release question. I'm interested in being part of the beta program. Is this possible?
Yes. So there's more details that we'll flesh out and send out, as you guys are, registering for the opt-in program. So we'll keep you connected in details, but that's something that's very close in the next month, month and a half. So for those who are interested, register for the opt-in program, and as we see that list grow, we'll make sure we're connecting with you guys as a follow-up to get you stay in tune with the beta.
Great, and I just wanted to highlight what Vic just said as well. We will be sending around an email to all registrants following this webinar, and one of the links will be to opt into the interest list, and that's your best way to just get the latest information on the timing and the features and the beta program, as Vic just mentioned. I've got another question here, looks like perhaps the last one. In Safety Stock Optimization module in Supply Chain Guru, there's a demand analysis tool. Will any of this Demand Guru features be added to that module in the near future?
So what you get as part of the Safety Stock Optimization module with demand analysis looks at specifically around demand variability and intermittency to enable the safety stock optimization. And we will continue to enrich that tool as we see fit, but the overall detailed deep dive on demand modeling will be part of the Demand Guru offering. So if you want more demand analysis or understanding your demand better in a little more depth, then we would recommend going to Demand Guru, performing those, and bringing it back very quickly into your Supply Chain Guru model. But not to say that we wouldn't continue improving the demand analysis capabilities within Safety Stock Optimization. This will be a way to add more value very quickly using Demand Guru.
Thanks, Vic. That is the end of the submitted questions. Now, if you have other questions that come to mind following the webinar, feel free to send those over to us. We'll have a contact name in the email that's sent following this. Take a look at the links that are available. There's a link to the opt-in list as well as a replay link. And just encourage you to continue to stay informed and asking your questions so that we can make sure that we get you the information you need about this exciting new product. I want to go ahead and thank all of you for attending. Thank you for your time today. We look forward to working with you and talking with you more about Demand Guru. And thank you, Vic, for presenting today and for sharing this information. Have a wonderful day, and we'll speak with all of you soon.
Thanks, everybody.